Welcome to the Defense and Airspace Report. I'm Vago Muradian from Malmen Air Base in Linköping, Sweden, the cradle of Swedish aviation and certainly on military aviation. And we're honored to have with us Major General Mats Helgesson, who is the Chief of the Swedish Air Force. Sir, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Or I should say, thanks very much for hosting us. You've been very generous to have us here. And in the spirit of full disclosure, Saab sponsored our trip here to cover both the conference that was held here. Sir, it's the 90th anniversary of the Swedish Air Force. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And I wanted to give you an opportunity. You know, what's the state of your force? What's the report card that you would give it at the moment?
The state is good. We are in a phase where we are sort of expanding into a new way of work. We have had many years of focusing on international operations, being a part of coalitions or as partners in NATO doing operations or exercises in a joint manner. Right now our focus is on national defense again. So we have a phase of sort of going back to the business as we did it in the 80s and 90s, and it's a shift.
When you look at, as part of this, the two-day strategy conference you had last week, there was, which happens every 4 years here, you were discussing a range of things, from air-based resilience to the challenge posed by the Russians, to better defenses, missile defenses. Long-range strike was something that was also discussed here. And at this moment of tension, again driven by Russia's actions, Ukraine, as well as the provocations in this region, there is a plan, and you've discussed it, about reducing the Gripen force from about 100 jets, CD jets, down by 30% down to about 60. Why is that a necessary move, and what are the risks that poses at a time when the concern about Russia is at its highest?
The political decision from the parliament is to acquire 60 new Gripens, the Gripen Echo version. The Defense Commission and the Defense, when we were asked how many Gripens we need for the future in 2012, we answered 60 to 80 Gripen Echoes to replace the current fleet. And a good thing to have in mind is that we also answered you must have a holistic view on air defense. You cannot only focus on Gripens or a single asset. You must have a holistic view. You must have air bases, you must have radars, you must have all electronic warfare, technicians, logistics, and so on. So you cannot really say a specific number of aircraft makes the whole day. You must have holistic and complete Air Force working to do air defense in a proper way.
When you look at that need for that holistic approach, are you satisfied you have the right radar network? And are you going to have to put into service, given some of the challenges posed by, for example, long-range Russian missiles? The Iskander is something that Russia likes to talk about a lot. It can be conventional, but also nuclear armed. And you have almost an anti-access area denial challenge similar to the United States. Are you going to have to focus on much more potent long-range air defense missiles, surface-to-air missiles for defense and for ballistic missile defense?
Yeah, I think we must have that. We must have a combination of both fighters and ground-based air defense with the capacity to make a proper defense against ballistic missiles, for instance, and also cruise missiles. And I mean, the most complicated threat you can have is that kind of missiles. And also the next generation of hypersonic cruise missiles will be a real threat for the air forces everywhere. So the demands for both airborne and ground-based air defense missiles will be high.
When you reduce the Gripen fleet, what are you going to do with those aircraft? They're very, very new. They're pretty fresh. They're less than 15 years old. I mean, is there an international customer that goes that then helps you raise some resources that help you pay for maybe some more Echoes?
I mean, some parts of the current Charlies and Deltas will be used in the build of the new Echoes. So when we are done with the transformation of the Charlie Deltas to the Echo, there will be some 35 to 40 aircraft still there of the old fleet. And what we will do with them is that's not decided yet, and that's a political decision to take in the future.
Does that give you, though, a measure of risk going down to 60 jets as front line instead of 93 or so?
If you have a possible future opponent who is on the same technological level that you are, and he's maybe having more aircraft than you have, of course the number of aircraft you have yourself is very important. So therefore the numbers are critical, and it should be analyzed really carefully before you take a final decision. And we have an upcoming Defense Commission, and they will look into the time period 21 to 26. And I think that commission sort of need to decide upon how many aircraft we must have. The current decision is, as you say, 60, and I think that figure should be really carefully analyzed.
There obviously is a lot of talk, and a lot of the concern is aimed at Russia and some of the capabilities it's fielding, its provocations, operating aircraft without squawking, for example, in the congested airspace in the region, other moves in the high north, the basing structure, etc. You know, as somebody who is and constitutes the front line of Sweden's defense, what are some of the capabilities Russia has that keep you awake at night?
I think they have a broad span of capabilities that are really impressive, to be honest. I mean, they are building up their fighting capacity. They are having a new generation of missiles also. The air defense and the ground-based missiles are world-class. So I think they have many different assets that's really impressive. So as in any business, it's a holistic approach. You must see what they have as a whole, and not be focusing on single missiles or ships or whatever.
In the event that Russia activates triple-digit SAMs over the Baltic, surface-to-air missiles, there is a concern that is a very, very big game changer regionally. What are some of the approaches that you would use to try to counter that, for example, if that happens?
I mean, when we decided upon Gripen Echo, we had this in mind. We saw the needs for enhanced electronic warfare capacity, enhanced capacity for endurance, and better radar and so on, better signal processing, and therefore we took the decision on the Echo. So a part of the decision about the Gripen Echo is actually to take care of the next generation, or actually the current generation of Russian ground-based air defense.
When you look at countering those capabilities, obviously strike missiles are a key piece of that. You know, you discussed long-range strike as something that Sweden has to be thinking about. Hypersonics were you know, a topic of discussion as well in the conference. As you look at, but Sweden also has been always very careful not to portray, you know, to always have a defensive posture and not be seen as the aggressor. But in this particular case, what are the kinds of long-range missiles do you have to consider to be able to counter some of these not only defensive systems, but also to take out some of the launchers, for example, for Iskander and other systems that would threaten Swedish cities as well as bases?
I think we have a need for both anti-ship and anti-ground targets missiles. Today we carry the RBS-15 anti-ship missile, and it's a long-range missile. And we are planning for the future, of course, to find the solutions for the next generations of long-range missiles. And I think the missiles that we will aim for in the future will be something that could be used against both targets on ground and oversea. So the next generation for both airborne or shipborne missiles will be something that you could use in all sort of target areas.
While all the attention is focused on the E model of the Gripen, the CD just has had its last block upgrade that includes the introduction of the Meteor missile onto the aircraft. What kind of a capability does that give the Swedish Air Force that it didn't have before?
It's buzzword, but it's really a game changer. The Meteor missile, with all those software updates that we have in the MS-20 edition that we now got in the Charlie Deltas, is really something extra. The missile itself is very, very good. The range and the performance is outstanding. So from a Swedish perspective and a Swedish Air Force perspective, this is really good for us. I think we have the best equipped fighter in the world right now, actually.
I want to ask you now about base resilience. You did spend quite a bit of time talking about that in your address, and you come from a generation that you know, the Swedish Air Force had 18 permanent bases, 60 war bases, an additional 80 road bases. That's an extraordinary number of bases for a small country.
Yes.
And as a Viggen pilot, as a J-37 Viggen pilot, you used to operate from roads.
Yes.
Now you have 3 air bases, 3 permanent bases. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, do you need more bases overall? And how are you getting back into the business of operating in a distributed manner?
We are right now taking back that capacity. Although where those bases are and which they are, I will not tell you because that's classified. And for instance, during the upcoming Air Force exercise next week, we'll do training on some of our training dispersed bases. So we are taking that capacity back, and we are having quite some progress also. So I say we are back on track, but there are a lot of things to do still.
What are some things that you have to do to better safeguard your bases, to improve that air-based resilience, so that you can operate even under heavy fire to be able to project power from those bases?
I mean, there is both the threat from missiles and long-range weapon systems, all sorts, but there's also a threat from special forces and other kind of ground-based units. So you need both to have a complex of well-integrated air defense missiles and fighters and short-range missiles, but you also need to have sort of ground forces being able to protect those base areas from special forces or rangers or that kind of units that could also be a problem for an air base.
Does your experience as a former Viggen pilot help you in this process?
I think so. I've done many years, decades to be honest, on those bases. So I have a good vision, and I also have a good idea of how to do it. Of course, we will never be as great as we were in those days. We will not have that amount of bases. But I think also that we also must regain and understand that we need more, for instance, ground units protecting our bases if we have a spread base system.
Obviously, Sweden and the United States have always been very, very close friends for a very long time, and now there is an effort in both of the countries to advance the defense relationship, to deepen defense cooperation between the two countries. What does that mean for your force, especially when it comes to training, exercises, or even equipment that may be in common, for example, with the U.S. Air Force's Europe?
I think common training will be extremely important for us in the future. Not only with the U.S. Air Force, but all air forces. Although we are focusing on national defense, we know that we will sort of be a part of the overall defense in our region, and we will have our friends all around us. So we need to be able to share information and also to understand the tactics and operations that we do. So having joint operations and joint exercises will be really, really important. And I mean, the European airspace is complicated. But if you go to the northern part of Sweden, Finland and Norway, it's not that complicated. So it's a very good place to have an exercise. So US Air Force and other Air Forces are welcome to join us in our exercises.
I want to take you to unmanned systems. Obviously, you know, Sweden's reputation is really great fighter aircraft. But you also, Sweden has done a lot of experimentation, including some very, very innovative unmanned aircraft. What's the future of unmanned aircraft in this future order of battle that you're creating for the Swedish Air Force?
I think that we will see a mix in the future. I think we will see maybe even fighter aircraft that could be manned or unmanned. And there could be some sort of complex with small unmanned aircraft with manned and so on. So maybe it could be a leader of the pack thing for one manned aircraft having small aircraft all around and so on. So I foresee that the Defense Commission also will sort of focus on this area, what to do in the future.
Gripen E could be unmanned, and do you think?
Why not?
That would be an interesting capability.
Although we haven't ordered any of those so far, but why not?
Why not? It reminds me, General Fogelman, you know, many years ago, it was in the 90s, where he was talking about, you know, the next generation of even unmanned joint strike fighter. You know, he was envisioning someday potentially being an unmanned system. Do your trainer and transport fleets, your trainer, 38 105s.
Yeah.
You have quite a number of hours
Yeah.
in that aircraft. Is not a spring chicken. It's not a particularly new aircraft.
Yeah.
And obviously now Saab is developing a trainer version. The TX, it's doing it in cooperation with Boeing in order to compete for the U.S. Air Force T-38 replacement program. But there are some folks who've said, well, the Super Tucano might be a good aircraft to be a trainer. As you look at your Swedish Air Force trainer requirements, could the TX be the aircraft that becomes the Swedish Air Force next trainer, seeing as how one of the two companies that made it is called Saab?
I mean, right now we are in the process of sort of setting the requirements, and we actually have a couple of different choices to make. One choice could be to extend the lifetime for the SK60, and it could be to go into something like a turboprop or even advanced jet lead-in trainer. We have not ordered any two-seaters for the Gripens in the next generations, so the Gripen Echo will be a single-seater, and therefore the training system must allow us to have fresh pilots going directly from training without the two-seater into the fighter fleet.
So a little bit like the Joint Strike Fighter, right? There's no two-seat version, so you've got to convert directly.
So you need to have advanced trainer at the right level, and also simulators, and the complete training system must allow to have fresh pilots going into a single-seat fighter without ever setting her or his foot in a two-seater.
Do you think, I mean, in part because Brazil is the launch customer for the Echo along with the Swedish Air Force, there's a sense that cooperation obviously with Brazil also will be very, very deep. That's why the Super Tucano comes up. And also there's quite a lot of discussion about whether the next transport, the KC-390 by Embraer might also be an aircraft that could be suited very well to Swedish requirements. As you look at the future of the Swedish Air Force transport fleet, understanding that you also have a share in the C-17 force as an investor in the NATO air transport model, how do you look at the future of Swedish airlift, especially at a time when you're going to have to do much more bare base operations all over the country? What's your view of what's the future of that transport force should be, and tanker force, frankly?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Tanker, if we start in that area, tankers, we need actually the tanking or air-to-air refueling capacity in order to be a relevant partner for international operations. For purely national defense, I don't see the need for air-to-air refueling, really. So I think we will keep the level we have right now also in the future. That is few resources, mainly for training and maintaining currency in air-to-air refueling. When it comes to the transport fleet, our intention is to lifetime extend the current C-130 fleet to have it operational until roughly 2030. But that said, we also need to right now start the planning for the replacement, because if we are going to have a new tactical transport fleet operational fully in 2030, we need to have it in place in Sweden 2026 or something like that, and then we have a process from now until then to sort of get all the demands right and plan for the introduction. So within a few years we will start the process to replace the C-130s, although we are planning for extending them 10 years.
Right. When it comes to air tanking, could you see yourself buying sort of a fleet of 3 or 4 aircraft, even quite large ones? Do you have a size idea in your mind? I mean, is it a 767 size aircraft? Is it a 310? Do you have a sort of a sense on what the size of that aircraft should be?
Not really. I will not say any figures there, because we really need to dig into it really more. And I think maybe we can cooperate with other countries also when it comes to sharing parts of the fleet.
You did fly the Viggen, one of the coolest aircraft that around. It was really great seeing the historic flight, demonstrating it. What was it like, flying the Viggen as a young Swedish Air Force pilot, at the height of the Cold War?
It was something extra. I'll tell you, it was extremely robust aircraft. Large engine, as you know, and
a turbofan with an afterburner and a thrust reverser.
Yes, it was really great, and I flew it for 12 years roughly, and it's a superb aircraft. I love it, and the sound of it is really great too. So hearing it today was quite some experience. So, well, I love it.
As you commemorate the birthday of your force, what makes you most proud of your history?
the men and the women in the Air Force. That's my pride, and the work that they do. The Swedish Air Force is quite small. We do great stuff, and that's due to our fantastic personnel. So they make me proud every day.
Well, it's about 2,000, 2,200 people. So they're working 24 hours a day, especially given the size of the country and the size of the force.
They are. So they are really skilled and really good.
One last question I want to ask you is about the DC-3.
Yeah.
This was an aircraft that is on display at the Swedish Air Force Museum.
Yeah.
It was a surveillance aircraft that was shot down in international waters on June 13, 1952. It was shot down by a MiG-15, and all 8 aboard were killed. It was on a surveillance mission, and the aircraft was recovered in 2003 and exhibited in 2009. What does this aircraft mean, to you as an airman and to Sweden?
First of all, it was a really tragic accident and a loss for us, of course. And I was so happy to hear when they could take it out from the ocean's bottom again and put it on the right place, and to have the story closed for us. That was really good, and good for me as an air chief to know. But basically, the incident itself was a wake-up call for Sweden. I think it was sort of the wake-up call that got us aware of the Cold War in many ways. Since then, or recently after that incident, we have had 24/7 awareness and fighters on alert and so on until today. So it was a serious wake-up call for Sweden.
Let me ask you one question about size. When you look back, the Swedish Air Force once was the 5th largest air force in the world.
Yeah.
Do you have a concern as the head of the Swedish Air Force that the force itself has gotten too small?
It's always a problem when you get small enough. Sooner or later, you do not have the capacity to sort of rebuild yourself. You are so stuck in keeping operations that you don't have enough personnel to have the schools and the facilities running that you need for the basic production. So size is of importance, of course.
Do you think that you'll be able to get to build back some of that mass overall, whether it's through using reserves in more innovative and creative ways, or just through outright increase in personnel?
If I were to decide, of course, I would like some more resources, but finally it's a political decision, and I hope that we could have good discussions with the politicians the upcoming years in the coming Defense Commission.
And of the 10 billion crown, there's going to be a 10 billion crown increase in the defense budget over the next 10 years. What share of that is yours, and what is that added investment going to allow you to do?
Well, I cannot say exact figures, but a significant part of it is aimed for the Air Force, and a significant part of it is aimed for resilience for our base system, for instance. So we are getting a fair amount of that 10 billions.
And when it comes to going back to road-based operations, do you have the Swedish Air Force had so much equipment that was devoted to that, whether it was fuel systems that were devoted to it, bombing and armament systems, repair systems that were mobile and being able to be distributed so that 4 or 5 airmen could get out there, you could land on a road and be serviced right away and get back up. Do you have to make an investment to rebuild some of that kind of capabilities?
Yes, we do. We really need to invest in those kinds of equipment to get that capacity back again. So, but that's something we are doing right now.
And one last question, which is the Swedish population. So many Swedes I know used to, if they loved airplanes, used to love the idea of Viggens that were mock dogfighting over their grandfather's house or something like that, or seeing them land on a base. But culture is very different. Conscription is no longer the case in Sweden. Not every Swede has been in the military and sort of understand it. And so there are people who've become quite comfortable with jets not landing on a road behind their house. Is the public a factor in this? Because I remember one Swedish friend of mine was already sort of expressing concern about the big exercise that's coming up. That's going to clog roads and it's going to be a challenge. Is that something that needs to be? Is that a factor?
It is, and it's actually a discussion right now in the Parliament. It will be discussed this autumn. There will be a report, an investigation on the personnel system in the armed forces, and it will discuss should we go back to conscription or not. And I think the outcome maybe will be something of a mix from the old and what we have right now. So I think it's also to have what you say, the connection to the people in common. That's a good thing to have the conscription system, because we have greater knowledge about the armed forces in the population.
Is that something you think you'll recommend, that there should be some form of model that more engages the population as a whole?
From my perspective, I think that would be a good idea.
Sir, thanks very, very much. We really appreciate it, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much.